Hello, folks, and welcome to Out on a Limb, a Lovers Lane podcast. My name is Stephen Lashley. I'm one of the hosts of this podcast, and I'm joined by...
I am the co-host of this podcast, Reverend Macy Liptoy.
And we have a good one for you today, as Steve Harvey says. We have Tiffany Taylor Wines, who is the co-founder and vice president of Orphan Outreach, which is a nonprofit based in Plano, Texas. And she does work all over the world, Russia, and she talked about Guatemala and different places. But they provide support for orphanages, right, all over the world. And we also welcomed Reverend Andy Nelms, who is an associate pastor here at Lovers Lane. He preaches at our Thrive service, which is our 9:30 service, and our Walnut Hill Church campus. And his experience, this episode is going to premiere during our Advent series, and it's about finding God's presence in the waiting. And so we invited both Tiffany and Andy on because they have such experience in the adoption process. Andy and his family just adopted a young girl into their family this year. And Tiffany adopted, two young infants from Russia about 20 years ago now, and obviously works with orphans and works with, adoption and foster processes around the world. And so we talked to them kind of, what was Stephen coined a phrase. I was thinking about this. I was thinking about the work that Tiffany does, and I was trying to, I've never adopted, obviously, but I was trying to imagine what it would be like to be just waiting. I mean, like you're waiting on paperwork, you're waiting on processes to kind of finalize themselves and to to just play themselves out. And there's things you can do, but there's also you're just stuck in what I said was just high stakes waiting. I mean, high stakes meaning like there's lives on the line. There's like people's their paths and lives are on the line, and I think really what we talk about in the episode goes beyond. I mean, it's if you're a person who has maybe been involved with the adoption process or the foster process, you'll understand a lot of what they're saying. But I think that there's something to be said for just high stakes waiting in general. And so maybe it's like, I think in the episode you talk about potentially just like people who are sitting in hospital rooms waiting on diagnoses.
Or even students waiting for that test result to get posted, waiting for those grades to come in, and the risk of or the high stakes waiting period of that. Maybe I think we can all, and then just generally speaking, we're in a time in our country where we're all waiting on a vaccine. We're waiting on how things are going to be played out. We're waiting on a number of different things, and we've been waiting this entire year. I mean, since basically March, for months now, we've just been in this, I think I say in the podcast, like this liminal period of waiting for something to change, and they keep moving the finish line on us, you know? And so I think one of the big things that comes up for me from this episode is, there are things we can do and there are things that we control, but there's a whole part of it, like you said, that you're just waiting for someone else to do their thing. And we attribute that in some ways, to God, is we're waiting for God to kind of step in and do stuff as well, because there's only so much we can do.
And really what I think we can all kind of take away from this episode is looking for ways to find God's presence in the waiting. And what does that look like? And I think there's a lot of lessons that can be learned from their experiences, their insights.
I really love listening to Tiffany's stories. She's got incredible stories from her experience of, being in founding Orphan Outreach and her own adoption experiences. So I really enjoyed this, and I think our listeners are going to really enjoy this episode as well.
So without further ado, let's get to our conversation with Tiffany Taylor Wines and Reverend Andy Nelms. How are you guys? That's really
good. It's a beautiful day.
It's good to have you both here. I'm sitting here with Tiffany Taylor Wines and Reverend Andy Nelms.
Hey.
And of course, Macy. How are you, Macy? You good?
Yeah, I'm good. I had coffee in between our recordings, so it's a
Oh,
good day.
I missed on that.
Made a
So
good
you're-
choice.
Always good.
You're properly energized.
I am. I
Okay.
really am. I made a good choice.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm just draining coffee today.
Okay.
Just pounding coffee.
I may have accidentally bought a cup at Starbucks is what happened.
Yeah.
I went in there and they had their Christmas cups out, and then I got real excited.
Like the mug?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Wait, you got free coffee from Starbucks?
I don't want to get free coffee from Starbucks. Are you kidding me? It's a corporation. I
Okay.
just bought a coffee mug.
I do like whenever you go in for your mobile order and they're just like, yeah, someone just left this. Do you want it? And you just get free.
Does that happen to you frequently?
Yeah.
What?
Really?
It happens at least like twice a month.
Are
Like,
you serious?
I would say that's pretty frequent. Too.
That's never happened to me in my life.
Really?
Really.
That's sad.
Do I look like
Maybe it's just.
Do I
maybe
look
it's
just mean? And you look
I think
you
it looks like he
nice?
needs coffee.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That
they
must be
look
what
at
it
it and they're
is.
like, this guy needs extra energy today. Give him
Yeah.
the leftover cold brew that no one wanted. Well, welcome to you both.
Thanks.
After that short just sidetrack on coffee. But Tiffany, let's start with you. Tell us who you are. Tell us what you do. Tell us a little bit about yourself. You're the vice president and co-founder of Orphan Outreach, right? So tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. Orphan Outreach is a ministry that was started in 2007. And we help orphaned and vulnerable children around the world by bringing them basically physical, spiritual, emotional care. And so it looks a little bit different in every country and in every program we work in, but we work with thousands of children around the world.
Okay. What countries are you in?
Right now we're in Guatemala, Honduras, India, Kenya, Russia, Latvia.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That really is global. Wow.
It is very global.
so cool.
And, you know, it's been such a weird year because normally I'm traveling the whole time. I get to take people on teams to go and see the ministry sites and to learn about what God is doing through orphan care and what we're doing. And so it has definitely been a big reset year for me, not being able to travel.
Yeah.
How does that change? I mean, like, what do you if you have to travel a lot and take teams and things like that, what do you typically end up doing most of the time?
And now that I'm not traveling.
Now that you're not traveling, yeah.
So I think the thing that's been really interesting is seeing our staff. So we have staff in all of the countries that are nationals of those countries. And we have literally non-governmental organizations, NGOs in those countries. And this year has been the year where we've just seen them have to step up, right? Mm-hmm. They've had to take care of their own. Mm-hmm. And they have been inventive. They have been just so intuitive on what the needs are in those countries. And honestly, they've really put themselves on the front lines because they're the ones out there feeding the people now. And so it used to be like, it might look like this, where we're working in a community of impoverished families, and the children are coming to an after-school program and they're getting food and they're getting education and then spiritual support, obviously. Now those children aren't even going to school.
Yeah.
And the families can't work. Mm-hmm. So we're feeding their entire families, where before we were just feeding the children. And then it's expanded to just crisis relief in all of the areas. So we see that God has just put us in place in these communities to be able to expand that relief. Right
so
now.
it's resourcing of families. Say a little bit more about like the specific work that y'all do. Is it?
So typically it looks like, so our name is Orphan Outreach.
Right.
So you might think orphans and orphanages.
Yes.
And we absolutely work with tons of orphans and orphanages around the world, whether it's a public orphanage in Russia or a private orphanage in Guatemala, just orphans all together. But to us, we really look at orphan care as like a continuum of care and how we can make sure that we're keeping orphans from going into orphanages. Like a lot of people picture orphans as little Orphan Annie. Right?
Yeah.
Like that's the first thing you think.
Like
Must
you've
say,
lost
yeah, I
both
think
your
of
parents
Broadway,
and you
yeah.
just
Yeah. And so for sure, like people always give us things that are pink and girly for little girls when we do collections because they're all thinking in their mind, Little Orphan Annie.
It's Shirley
Really?
Temple. Yeah.
It's so funny.
like they'll just that stereotype's really that.
Yes. If we're
Wow.
collecting shoes, we'll get more pink shoes about that size of a little girl. We'll get more pink clothing because that's in everybody's mind. That's what they think an orphanage is
Wow.
and what it's like for kids and that the kids have no parents. But the reality is around the world, all of these children have parents. They've been separated them for the most part because of maybe disease, maybe war, but usually financial reasons.
Wow.
They
Really?
literally cannot take care of those children. And a lot of people don't understand like how large the orphan care problem is. UNICEF estimated last year, I think, 150 million orphans in the world.
Wow.
But of those, about 10 million of them are in orphanages around the world. So if you just kind of picture, it's a huge problem, right? So for us, we have to look at how we help those kids in the orphanages, but can we also do family preservation? What can we do to prevent the children from going into the system in the first place?
So what you're saying is that there are kids that are in orphanages that actually have parents, but the parents just don't have the means to take care of them. And so they end up in these places assuming they don't have parents, and really they do have a family that just can't provide for them.
Absolutely.
Wow.
And so there has been a huge movement in Orphan Outreach. We've been a big part of letting people know that it is not the best place for a child to grow up. It's not singing show tunes.
Yeah.
And
With Daddy Warbucks.
It's a hard knock life.
Exactly.
I mean,
And
because
so-
that's the. I mean, like you can picture like Oliver Twist or
Exactly,
like
yeah.
Little Orphan Annie. Those are the stereotypes. But it's I don't know. It might be a little bit more heartbreaking to hear that. I mean, orphan is much more of a larger definition where they still have parents, but their parents just can't provide
They
for
might
them.
have also been maybe removed from them for abuse or neglect or
wow.
any of those
Okay.
reasons too. But there might be a grandmother that would love to have
Right.
them
Right.
in their home and be in their life, or an aunt or an uncle or some other family member. And a lot of these countries, their system is just overwhelmed. So they
Yeah.
don't even know where to start on how to even put kids into other options. Foster care, kinship care is what's that called, if you're with a different family member. So we're helping go into these countries and talk to them about options for children instead of just automatically residential.
Yeah.
Because study after study have shown that residential is just not a great outcome for children. Children are meant to be in families.
Yeah.
Right.
So is it pretty different from country to country? Like some of the, I guess, like how you have to work with different agencies and things like that. Are y'all helping to work with orphanages in different countries, or I guess what's that kind of like?
Yeah, so it just really does look different in every country. So I'll back up a little bit. I've been doing orphan care and the people at Orphan Outreach. We started doing it in the mid-90s.
Okay.
So I was led to do it after my husband and I adopted from Russia. We adopted babies, one in 1996 and one in 1998. And at that time, across the world, we really realized that, like, say, in Russia, they had no idea about foster care as an option. They were sort of like the 1930s orphanages here in the United States. So it was actually going in and really talking with the government there about other options for children. We're still working in Russia. There's still orphanages, but there's a lot less kids in the orphanages. So in Russia, it looks like to us, helping the kids as they age out of the orphanage system. Children we've known for 20 years, that are young adults, and young adults need a lot of support, right? I
Yes,
Yeah.
can confirm as a young adult, I need a lot of support.
yeah, right? And so can you imagine not having someone to go to?
No.
And especially if we're wanting to disciple these children
Right.
and disciple their relationship with the Lord, we really want to be able to be there to meet their physical, emotional
Right.
needs so we can meet those spiritual needs. So
Yeah.
it does look a little bit different. But as we have the experience to go in, and we've gained experience in talking with governments about different options for children.
Yeah.
Wow.
That sounds like amazing work. I mean, do you like that? You said that comes from just your personal experience with it, you and your husband's experience with it. Can you just talk a little bit more about like where that comes from and just like what that process was like, the adoption process from Russia?
Sure.
What was that process like for you guys?
So for us, it was kind of the Wild West of adoption back then in the 90s.
Yeah.
So, and adoption at that time also, there were a lot of people adopting internationally. So China was a big country for adoption. Interestingly enough, we were too young to adopt from China. They like you to be 35 or older at that time.
Really?
Because they have a culture based on wisdom with elders.
Yep.
That makes
So
sense.
we heard Russia was open and they needed people. And so we're like, okay, sign us up. So when we look at it now, we see God's hand in every step.
Yeah.
We actually filled out the paperwork the week our daughter was born.
Really?
So we realized that God, we thought about it and prayed about it and gone to meetings, but we realized God was like, okay, gave us that nudge. Like, now is the time because she is born and you got to get going so you can go get her. And I will say for both of them, the thing that broke my heart was we went over to adopt them. You go and you see the orphanage, and I'm a curious person, so I might have, when I went to the bathroom at the orphanage, maybe snuck down the hallway and maybe peeked in a few doors, maybe a little bit, because I just wanted to see, you know, what was it like where she was. And I was just heartbroken by the number of children. Each baby home would have over 100 babies from 0 to 3 at that time. So you just can imagine crib after crib after crib filled with these beautiful babies. And when we got home, I would look in the face of our little daughter, and two things always hit me. One, how can there not be a God if my daughter was born on the other side of the world?
Yeah.
Like Brad and I were so certain this was our daughter. Like this is exactly, she'd been born in our heart.
Yeah.
You know, like this is, she was supposed to always be with us. So there has to be a God. And then the second was, what about all those little babies that don't have someone who's holding them at night and loving them and only thinking of them and putting them first? And I have to do something to help those kids. So that just set me on a path. Praise the Lord, I just had a husband who always just let me kind of go along with that path, right? Like, you know, didn't hold me back, right? Because it took both of us in the relationship. Like, and so I went, I volunteered for an organization that was working in Russia. I went on my first mission trip in 1999.
Oh my gosh.
And then I thought my heart had been broken before, but on that trip, you go from orphanage to orphanage to orphanage to orphanage filled with children.
Yeah.
And I thought, I have to do something to make a change. And on the flight back, I literally said a prayer to God. I said, it's the only time I really have felt him speak to me. I was like, I wish I was young and could do whatever I wanted to do. Now, mind you, I was 32 at the time. So, but to me, I had a path in my life. And I was like, this is my path. And God was like, hey, you are young. That's the only thing he's ever said to me. So I was like, oh yeah, you're right. I am. I can do it.
Of all the things you can expect from God, just a big booming voice. It's like, okay, you are young. Hello. You've got time to do these things.
Yeah. So I went back and talked to my husband and said, I feel called to do this. And he said, well, if God said you're supposed to do it, then he will make a way. So do it.
That's amazing. So you're a co-founder. So who's the partner? Who's
so
the
there actually were 6 of us that started Orphan Outreach.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay. Wow.
And we all came from a different ministry that had been doing international work, and at the same time, we all felt called to start Orphan Outreach. So
at the same time,
that's like a whole nother amazing God story, of course, but. Looking back again, it was 2007, and I think we were pretty naive in some ways, starting an international ministry,
You kinda have to be,
right?
Yeah.
You kind of have to be. You have to be like, we're just going to do this, and it's just going to work out. And then 2008 was the financial crisis.
Yeah.
Yep.
The stock market, didn't it crash something like that?
Recession.
Or a recession,
Yeah.
A huge recession. So we'd started in April of 2007, and I can tell you, sitting here to today, we have financially grown every year since we started.
Wow.
Even that 2008 year, our numbers have gone up by like 15%.
Yeah.
So we've been able to serve more and more and more children, and we just see God's hands
Yeah.
in every bit of that.
Yeah.
Wow.
What's a really good day look like for you and your work? Like, what's a really, really good day look like?
Well, that's a great question. A really good day for me is being on the mission field.
Yeah.
That's why this year has been so hard, right?
Just sitting on your hands.
Yeah, and just being able to be in the background. So a really good day to me is literally just being there with the kids. It's a day when I walk into an orphanage and the children are screaming Tia Tiffany, because I go by Aunt Tiffany down there, you know, and that they know that I'm back. And I just I miss hugs so much. I feel so blessed. I was able to go in March, right before the countries closed down.
Oh, wow.
And I have to tell you, I was with a team of about 20 women, and we were hugging those kids extra tight because we thought, well, maybe we might be shut down for a month or two.
Yeah.
Like my May trip may not happen. I may not get there back till July. And now I don't know when I'm going to go back.
Yeah.
But what I have faith in is our staff has been there pouring into those kids. So that's the thing that keeps me going.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Andy, you've got some experience with the adoption process and things like that. Just was kind of curious to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I don't have as much as Tiffany, and I'm so excited that you're here. Like, oh gosh, I think I've gotten to hear your story like 2 or 3 times now, and it's awesome. So thank you for sharing that. And so Melissa and I are kind of new to Texas, right? So we've been here for about a year and a half. Steve and I are both from Oklahoma.
Yep.
And thank you, appreciate it.
That's why you're out all the way over there.
Yeah, I feel bad.
Macy.
Macy has like her own like little sad table
Yeah.
off to the side.
This is
we're-
the lead table.
Oh,
Don't feel
right.
bad.
Oh, okay.
I'm
That's
on
why
top of these things.
That's why she's got the flowers behind her. I've got these smaller,
Interesting.
I have
yellow
the big
flowers.
flowers.
She's got the big flowers.
I'm just kidding.
But no, so we're from Oklahoma, and well, I mean, I guess kind of backstory. When Melissa and I first got married, of course, you start talking about like the family you're gonna have and all that stuff, and my wife Melissa had always talked about fostering or adopting, and that scared me a little bit. My mom was like a subscriber to like Reader's Digest, like when that was the thing, I guess.
Yeah.
And for some reason, I picked up one of them, and I actually read an article. It was kind of this horror story about an adoption that just, went wrong, And I was, probably like 12 or something like that, and so it really, kind of scared me. I was like, man, I don't know if I want to get into that. And so when Melissa and I got married, she's like, hey, I want to do adoption. I'm like, okay. Way down the road, right? Our kids grow up, they're aged up, we've sent them off well, maybe adoption after that point, or fostering or whatever. And then when Melissa and I were in Oklahoma, we were serving a church, we met a family that had 3 girls that were adopted into that family. And Melissa was a student minister, I was an associate pastor. I got to help lead their confirmation. So, I mean, we really interacted a lot with these girls and knew them pretty well. And then summer, gosh, what was that, 2017, I got a phone call from Oklahoma DHS. Said that these girls are being removed from the home and that they had asked, we asked them where they'd want to go stay for an interim period, and they asked if they could come stay with you. And of course, the answer was yes. It wasn't, we're like, okay, we'll go big. So we picked them up, loaded them. We have a minivan that we call our swagger wagon. Yeah. So we had plenty of room. Loaded them in the van, brought them home. At the time, our son Elijah was almost 2, and Anna, that makes her like almost 5. And so we had these 3 girls in our home for about a month and a half. And it was great. I mean, it was exhausting and terrifying and loud and all these things. There were, there were 7 of us in a 4-bedroom house.
Wow.
Which, isn't made for that. And so, but it was great. We found a kind of a more permanent foster care placement for them until they could figure something out. Then fast forward to March of this year. One of the sisters had aged out. We knew that. We'd been in contact with the girls. And then there were other 2 that were going to be adopted into another home. We got another call from Oklahoma DHS that didn't know that we had moved to Texas and said, the middle child is looking for another adoptive placement. It's just not going to be a good fit. We want you to consider adopting her. And I mean, it was just a heavy question, and especially for me, having gone through this process of, we had the 3 girls, like I thought we did that, you know what I mean? Like, but, we had to pray about it. I had, talked to some of my mentors about it, and really felt like this was the thing that we were being called to do. And I knew, and I've said this before, like I knew it was from God because I didn't immediately want to do it. You know what I mean? Like
You're out on a limb. You're uncomfortable.
Yeah. I mean, like, you know, if something interrupts your thought process, that's probably not you thinking it, right? That's probably like the Spirit interceding in my cognitive ability in some way, whatever you want to call that. So the greatest thing was that, you know, Melissa and I talked about it, and I kind of had this contingency because I was just like, let's talk to the kids about it. You know, they're old enough to, like, the decision doesn't lie with them, but we want to know their opinion, how they feel about it. So Elena was the child that was looking for an adoption and placement, and so we were playing with the kids in the game room and just kind of, you know, like, not real formal, just like, hey, you know, we heard that Elena is looking for a place to live. What do you guys think about her living with us? And like both of them were just like, yes, you know, like I was just like, guys, be cool, you know, like I was, you know, holding this as a contingency plan, and they were just like, yeah, like that's what we're gonna do. And then every day after that asked when Elena was gonna come live with us.
It's so cute.
Oh, it was amazing. And yeah, so we adopted. We actually adopted. So July 10th was the adoption date. July 11th, Elena turned 18. So
Wow.
It was a process, man. I mean, you know, trying to get all that stuff done, because the goal was to get her adopted before 18, because then she gets another year of services while she's 18. And so we were really, so, you know, pretty soon after that, so April, she came and stayed with us, probably late April, early May, and then we were booking it, trying to get that whole process done, which, I mean, Tiffany knows is no small feat to get all the paperwork done. But, I mean, we're so thankful. It's just been an incredible blessing.
Do you think you're still in the honeymoon period of it all then?
No, I mean, honeymoon phase. No, I mean, because we knew her beforehand. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, all of this stuff is like, if God wanted me to adopt, God would have done it in this way. You know, like, you know the child, you have a relationship, and all of these things. And so, like, that's kind of the way it worked out. You know, because when she came and stayed with us, you know, we had to have like really serious conversations, because like she and her sisters had stayed with us before, and so like we knew the things to look out for. So we had pretty serious conversations early on about, you know, what was going on, and so. But who knows? Maybe, right? Maybe you're still in the. How do you know if you're in the honeymoon stage?
I don't know.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
It's a good question.
You don't. I mean, you really
right.
don't. You just kind of you get through it, and you're like, oh, we're done with the honeymoon phase. But no, I mean, we're, you know, we have missteps and small conflicts. And
Yeah.
But that's, I mean, I would assume that's pretty standard with any
Right.
child thing.
Yeah, that's parenting.
Yeah, that's
Right.
right.
That's basically the
It's
basic
parenting.
Yeah.
fact of parenting.
Exactly.
Not that I have any personal experience, but I'm guessing that's what it is.
No, it's accurate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're entering into this Advent season. By the time people are listening to this, we'll be I think we'll be past Thanksgiving, but we'll be entering into this Advent season, and the kind of our topic for this Advent is God's presence. Obviously a play on words with it being presents and presents.
That's cute.
Isn't that good? Did you ever catch that?
Just got
You did
that.
not just get that.
A little bit.
We'll have a prayer for
little
Macy
bit.
later.
All right, we need to pray over Macy.
It's 2020, guys. I like got God's presence, but I didn't understand. Okay.
But we're talking about
Cool,
God's
cool.
presence in different seasons of life, different scenarios, different situations. And the reason why we wanted to have both of you on is because we're talking about God's presence in waiting. And Advent's a time of preparation, of anticipation, and it's kind of an excitement thing too. Maybe it's also a time of, I don't know, just especially this year, kind of dread too, kind of going on. But you both seem to have a lot of experience with just high stakes waiting. And what I mean by just high stakes waiting is just like, just intense pressure, probably. Like you've probably you've probably been in a situation with your both two daughters?
A daughter and a son.
A daughter and a son, okay. Where you had to probably wait, right? Like you just mentioned, Andy. Can you just describe I guess just describe what it's like to wait like that. Just for those who, what does that feel like to be in the middle of just a very high stakes period of waiting?
So it's really interesting. You sent these questions yesterday, and I even Googled high stakes waiting because I'd never heard it said like that before, right? Like,
I think I probably just wrote it down.
I think it's a Stevenism.
is it? Because I was like,
think he might have
high
coined it.
stakes. And there was not really any good Google answers, just to let you know.
Good.
If anybody
Well,
else
that's
out
good
there
to
is
know.
thinking about Googling
Copyright
it,
that.
it's not going to
This
work.
I don't know if
Yeah.
that's a good thing or not.
This might be a good thesis statement if you want
High
to go
stakes
back.
waiting.
Yeah,
High stakes waiting.
But
But
just the pressure.
I really realized, that of course, I mean, the whole time, there felt so much pressure for so many reasons. We were, when you have a child biologically, after you've conceived and you're pregnant, you kind of know what the date is going to be, right? Around,
You gotta guess, yeah.
around this month. And if it's a boy or girl, usually a lot of people find that out beforehand. And when you're adopting, you don't know any of that. All of that goes out of the window. And timing, like, you don't know when your paperwork's going to be approved. You don't know when you're going to be able to send it off. Then you don't know when at that time in Russia, you got a referral, which was like, they emailed you a really short little video of a child and said, does this child, do you want this child or not? Basically, is what they would
emailed
do.
you a video and was like, do you want this kid?
Yeah. Well, they mailed you one on FedEx. We didn't have email back. And
Oh my gosh, did you get like a
Like a
FedEx
VHS.
like I got,
tape.
we actually
Yeah.
literally
Seriously?
got a legit FedEx of a VHS tape that I had to run and copy to send to grandparents and all of that, right?
of
Was
just like a little infant.
a little infant. And for our daughter, her name is Ina, which is actually even an unusual Russian name. It's not a
Yeah.
normal name. And I'd had all these really pretty Russian names picked out. Tatiana, Dasha. So I had in my mind what, a child might look like. And on the video, she's being held by a nurse at the orphanage and they're calling her name. And every time they called her name Ina, she would look. And I was like, well, she knows her name.
Right.
So I can't change her name. I'm taking everything else from her culture and her world.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to keep that name. And so Brad and I were really rooted that was going to be her name because she just kept looking. But they gave you literally a little paragraph about the child, the age, health concerns, those kind of things where you could make a decision, yes or no. It was not a long decision process, as you can imagine, kind of
Right.
like when you got the call.
Right.
There's
Right.
you think for a second and you're like, yes, of course.
Right.
Because this is
Yeah.
what we've been moving towards it. But regardless, it was all in God's plan that was the videotape that we were going to get that day.
Wow.
And, what was the question? Oh, waiting.
Yeah.
Waiting. So then
yeah.
there was the waiting for that. And at the time, my husband's mom, had a cancer diagnosis. And we knew she was not long for this world. And so he had this extra really tense, worry, because he wanted to get home with a baby so that she could see that he was a father for the first time. And she was really worried. She'd read a lot of those Reader Digest kind of books, I
Right,
think.
right.
And she was so worried, and she was praying every day for this child who we didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
Was it all going to work out? And, those kind of horror stories people have about it. And so she was very concerned. So we had that pressure. And then you go to Russia, and when we got to Russia, at the time, Boris Yeltsin had a heart attack. He was the prime minister at the time, and all the governors of the regions had to go to Moscow. So we were in this little town in the middle of nowhere, Russia. There's not even food on the shelves. I mean, it was the 1990s, and all the signs are in Cyrillic. And we had met our daughter, but we didn't know if he was ever going to sign the papers.
Yeah.
And I think I mentioned this in small group. I brought up, I was like, what about money? Would money help with the situation here? And I mean, because I was so panicked.
Yeah.
And of course, money was not the answer to the situation.
Right.
That's a very American kind of, capitalism kind of
Can I pay for
solution.
this to make it go
Yeah,
faster?
can I pay for it to make it go faster?
Yeah.
Because we were so panicked that we were going to have to get on that plane and go all the way back, and that we weren't going to have our baby girl with us that we, met. And this was one thing to have her little short video and her little picture on the fridge, but then when you met her and held her, so that waiting was excruciating.
I can't, and it just seems like there's nothing you can do, right? I mean, there's certain things you can do, but you kind of just have to
It's completely out
You
of
sit
it was
in it,
completely out of our
right?
hands, really, most of the process.
So, but tell the rest of the story though, right? So because
Remind me.
because you're waiting. So you have a plane ticket. You're waiting to get your daughter before the plane ticket so that you can get back to see your husband's mom. With the baby.
With
right?
the baby.
So
oh yeah, and so again, it was what Brad remembers. We were standing in the hallway of the orphanage, and he turned and he saw the nurse like running towards him with our daughter. And he just remembers that side of her. And he always talks about to her, I just remember the side of you when you were there running towards us, and the paperwork had been signed. And so we were able to get on the flight and come all the way back and get down to Houston. Yeah. And she was able to meet, her grandmother before her grandmother passed. I think we came back early October, and his mother didn't pass till December. So we went several times. And we just saw God's hand in that too. And I think that's the thing when I was thinking about high stakes waiting, when you said that, for everyone, we pray for God to give us patience and to give us, grace and understanding, and to, make it so we're not like trying to rely on things like paying for a baby or any of those kind of things, which are not appropriate. And I say we should not be paying for babies. But I think that when you get past it and you look back, then I saw God's hand in everything. Like Brad and I could be like, wow, she was born the week we mailed the paperwork to the agency. She was, her birthday is January 4th. And so they have to be in an adoption, available for adoption for Russians for 6 months. So her Independence Day is July 4th, when she was made able to
Isn't that amazing?
Have a family, right? So we're like, whoa, look at this. And then we found out about her July 16th. We were to go September 25th. Like each of those things, we look back now, we're like, it was our daughter. Like if it had gone quicker or slower, like there was another family waiting in line, that God had his hand in it the whole time. Yep. And so I guess that's what I think about with what's going on now with COVID, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That like, we're going to get past it and we're going to look back.
That's great.
And we're going to see, okay,
right,
God wanted us to slow down,
right,
or whatever it was. Like, I don't know what I'm going to see when I
right.
get to the other side, but I know that I've gone through things time and time again with high stakes waiting that, that you, at the end of it, when you get to the other side, you realize.
Yeah. Andy, is your experience with that similar, or is it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, this is all like pretty fresh for us, right?
Right.
I mean, July. So we had basically like 2 months to adopt Elena.
Which that's such a short period of time.
It is a crazy short period of time, and also there's special work that you have to do to adopt across state lines. So like I told you, Oklahoma didn't know that we had moved to Texas. So when they called us, they said, "Do you want to adopt?" And we said yes, but we moved to Texas, and then immediately the person said, "Well, that's just not going to work."
Oh wow.
And she's like, we can try it, right? And so we went through this process, and God bless, so we had Elena before we officially adopted her. It was kind of like a kinship placement, right? So like for a month, an adoptive child can just be in a home that's like a close family friend or relative, and so we were kind of in that kinship placement. We had that for 30 days. And then we had it extended for another 30 days so we could continue it. And so in this like extended kinship placement, we're talking with every agency we can find to try to figure out how to go through this process. And, God bless people who work in, Texas CPS, Child Protective Services, or Oklahoma DHS, Department of Human Services. It can't be an easy job. Yep. It's just, and people who work there, I think, genuinely feel called to it. Mm-hmm. But there were certain parts along the process that Melissa and I just kind of felt like there were people working against us in the process, which, maybe they weren't, right? I mean, but it's just one of those things where you just felt like, hey, I'm trying to get this through because this is the deadline we're working against. And some people are just saying, well, good luck, and
super helpful. Clearly.
No, yeah. I mean, it was
good luck.
Good luck. Have fun.
Yeah, I mean,
cool,
it was,
thanks.
it was, I mean, it was really awful. Like I I think back on that and just like how hard it was to be in that period of we're working towards this time and we don't know if Elena is going to be adopted. Now, in that time, it was really important, and Melissa and I talked a lot during this time of like focusing on what we could do, right? Like we could make phone calls to people, we could send emails, but we can't control how fast somebody moves paperwork from one desk to another. And so like, okay, I can call this person today. I can send this email. I can do this thing. And to know at the end of the day, the good news was the reason that we were working so hard is so that Elena would have these services for another year, and be able to receive the stipend that she'd be able to put away in savings and have this kind of nest egg, whenever it is. She's not moving out anytime soon, but whenever it is she moves out. We worked way too hard for her to move out next year. But so I mean, so we had to like look at, okay, these are the things that we can do. And the good news is like, regardless, she's still going to be in our home. Like whatever they say, she's our daughter. But that high stakes waiting was hard. And I think the only thing that got us through it was obviously the grace of God and letting God control what God does and us doing the things that only we could do. And like I said, we made it. And I don't, so we have, like our adoption day, it was on Zoom, and we're getting dressed up, like we're going to church, and we've got the computer set up, and the kids are there with us, and Elena's there with us, and Melissa is just like elated. It's in the morning, so we all get up extra early just to get ready for it and celebrate it. And Melissa is just like beaming. She's so excited, and she's looking at me, and she's like, "You look terrified," and I'm just like, I'm terrified that at any point this is going to fall apart.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow.
Like I'm terrified that like we're going to sit in front of the computer and the judge is going to say something, because it's not official until the judge declares that it's so, right? So I mean, like I'm terrified that any number of things could happen along this process that it's just not going to work. And of course it didn't. I mean, it went smoothly, and like as the court appointment was going on, I could see that it was like, oh, this is happening, and so like I'm like getting more and more excited, and of course it happened.
So you waited literally until like you felt like you were in a pattern of waiting, and literally until it was over.
Basically until she hit her gavel. Like I was had that like twinge of anxiety.
Yeah.
I think flying back from Russia, the same. I mean, until we hit the ground here in the United States,
right?
It didn't seem like it was real. So it's like you're holding your breath.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And you've been waiting, and it is so high stakes. I mean, you can't have higher stakes than the life of a child, right?
Right.
So yeah.
I mean, there's tons of different things you can think about in terms of just high stakes waiting, and it's like it's not like you're afraid of something impending, like something immediately happening to you. Like it's not like you're driving a car and you're looking out for an accident. It's like you're waiting until the very last, like you said, until the gavel strikes, and it's just this foreboding kind of sense of. I think the word you used was excruciating in terms of how it made you feel. I'm just really, really curious. You said that it was nothing but the grace of God that helped you through it. And then I can't remember how you phrased it, but same sort of thing. Can you talk about moments during that wait where you knew that you knew that you knew that God was with you, that God was with you in that specific moment? Is there anything that you can think of?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, so there were people that we felt like, we were, I was praying for, because I felt like they weren't necessarily as helpful as they could have been. But then there were other people. There was a person doing our home inspection, which I feel like you had to do 1 million. And they were like different, like, oh, this person has to come inspect your home, and this person has to come inspect your home. One person like was doing, like, we were on FaceTime, we were showing around our house, and she was like, do you have like a hand towel rack? And I was like, is this the most important thing that we can be talking about right now? Like, what is going on?
I don't think I have a hand towel rack.
Yeah. The towel was laying there on the counter, and it was like, what? No, but they could. I'm pretty sure they could dry their hands right there. She's 18; she can figure it out. But the like one of the last people to do a home inspection was actually like a contractor. Like they had this other people to do it, and that was like one of the last things we were waiting for, was this person to come inspect our home, and And the date that it was scheduled, like this is just a contract work. So they just kind of send it out and they're like, hey, can you do this? And then they just say yes. And then they make the schedule the appointment. Well, the time that they had scheduled the appointment was for after Elena had already turned 18. And so that was like it. I mean, according to DHS, they weren't going to do anything more, you know, because that's the contractor. You know what I mean? And so we called the person scheduled to do the appointment. And we're just like, hey, this is what's going on. And the woman said, you know, she said, I've adopted 3 kids.
Wow.
And there's nothing I wouldn't do for them. And she said, I'll be there tonight. And so the day we called her, she showed up.
The right person at the right
time.
Right. And she said, you know, I'll rush this along. I mean, she was one of our last steps. And like we had that person not gone through the adoption process, not been willing to show up after hours at our house, not been willing to stay up. I mean, she was texting us like 11 o'clock that night because she was writing this report and she was asking us questions and like, I mean, that was the grace of God.
It's like the innkeeper that got it right.
Absolutely.
Oh,
Yeah.
totally.
We do
Yeah.
have room for you in the end.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Wow.
What about you, Tiffany? Is there a moment that you can think of that is just, or even now, just in the work that you do now, where you just see God's hand at work and it's just present with people or present with families during this time of just high stakes waiting?
There's so many moments, really, right? Because if you really, like I said, it's when you get to the other side of things and you look back and you think,
Right.
wow, God just really knew all those things. So the people that he has just brought into my life and just seeing how he has provided ways for ministry in ways that I could never imagine. So, of course, you know, our story started, Brad and I, we adopted Ina.
Mm-hmm.
We flew back on October 3rd of 1996 with her. Our son was born October 3rd in 1997. Of course, we didn't really, again, God just kept giving us these dates to say, you know, I kind of call them God winks. Other people call it that, you know, like, hello, I was there the whole time.
Right.
The whole time when you weren't really sure. My husband and I for sure have always said, like, I would have been the old lady in the shoe with too many children. She didn't know what to do. Like, if I could have forged his signature, I would have just kept on adopting and been one of those serial adopters. But I see now that God just had this plan for me in ministry, and I could not have seen it at all. Like, you have to understand, I was working in a very secular job, doing annual reports for oil and gas companies that like rape and pillage the earth, basically. You know, it was a very different kind of job, working 90 to 100 hours a week. And I never would have thought of myself as someone in ministry. I think sometimes people set up in their minds what someone in ministry is like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So for us, there was a printer. My husband also was working in advertising. There was a small printer in Mesquite, Texas, that did a lot of printing for my agency that I worked at and I was a partner at. Their other big client was my husband's agency. Their third client was this ministry I ended up working for first. Wow. And he put us on the mailing list because that ministry had started working in Russia. And he's like, oh, I think that they would enjoy getting these mailings. And one day I picked up the magazine and I just cold called them and said, hey, I work in advertising. Maybe there's a way I could help. Yeah. And so I just think that God wanted to make, like, he brought that all together. It wasn't, only he could have made that be, right? Yeah. And he does that for everybody. And when you get on the other side of it and you look back, you see, wow, he had that all lined up. He knew we were going to adopt Ina. He knew we were going to go back and adopt Misha. He knew that, you know, that there was another path for me than what I was doing at the time.
What I think is so interesting about y'all's stories is that, you know, there are, like you said, I think you both have said, there are things that you can do and control, but then there's another half to the story that you just have to trust in the waiting.
Right.
And that's so difficult because especially I feel like now, like, we're so used to having control over every aspect of our lives.
Right.
And yet that there's this whole part of Christianity and this whole part of faith that requires us to you know, meet God halfway, but then we're meeting God halfway. There's another half that exists. And so can you kind of speak to that of like, how can you help people be a little bit more comfortable in that space of knowing this is what I can do and I can do no more.
Right.
You know?
Well, I think, a lot of it for us too is, and I say us, people, especially like in, North Texas, North Dallas, we can do like a lot of things for ourselves, and so most of the things that we do are within our own power and we're really comfortable with, and we've been really successful at. And I think to like step into this phase of waiting opens you up. You lose power, but you're opened up to such a greater experience than you could have ever done on your own, right? I mean, like you can't just adopt a child on your own, right? Tiffany tried. She, tried to pay off the Russians.
It didn't work. It did not work.
Well, and Tiffany mentions that. I remember thinking the exact same thing. Like, what do they need? I'll do it.
Yeah.
And they're just like, it doesn't work that way. You can't do that. And thank God it can't. Right. I mean, like,
right.
Because this entire process, part of this process, I think for me at least, and I would say for Tiffany, is just like for God to prove that God will do what only God will do.
Yeah.
And you can't do that if you're only doing things that you are 100% comfortable with.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like you've been prepared for, like everyone is just waiting right now? It feels like,
right.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
We were waiting on election results. We've been waiting all year long. It feels like to me. Just in a.
Well, I feel like, we're in this, I remember thinking again in March, like, oh, we'll shut down for 3 months and we'll be cool. And then we'll have annual conference in June. We'll have mission trips. We'll have all the things. And we're still waiting for...
Right. Wait a month, it'll go back to normal.
Yeah, and
Wait
hasn't.
3 months, it'll go back to normal.
And for sure, that was very similar to my adoption story with both of them, because it was the deadlines you could not control. That's where it gets really hard. Like, it's easier to wait. That's why I was like, again, I haven't had a biological child, but I would think in some ways it's easier to wait because you can God is, 9 months.
Yeah.
Well,
you know
the
ending.
Be a baby.
Yeah,
you know the
ending.
ending.
Yeah.
But with adoption, it was like the deadline kept changing and moving and going back and forth. And we were actually really lucky. Both of our adoptions happened fairly quickly. Some people wait years and years for adoption.
Yeah.
And I've counseled lots of families with that, and I can't even imagine that where the goalpost keeps changing.
Moving.
And that's what's happening right now, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's the same thing. Like, we all thought, well, we can do this for a little while. And then, the summit of the mountain has just kept going and going. And we're like, okay, so now we're going to do it a little while longer.
Well, they're moving the finish line on us. And there's, you bring up, families waiting. I have a family friend from where I went to school in undergrad, and they fostered their now adopted daughters for 3 years.
Right. Yeah.
And during that whole 3-year process, it was the toss-up of the family might come back and decide that they're able to take these girls, and so these girls that become part of this family are now no longer part of this family.
Right.
And so they never knew up until, the gavel hit. Was this actually going to be part of my life? And I feel like that's kind of where we are now, this liminal space of, are we done? Are we not? Oh, we're going back. Oh, we're moving forward. Oh, we're in this unknown space. And so I just, part of me wonders, how does that relate to this, this Christmas story that we read every year about waiting and anticipating and expecting something incredible, and yet not really knowing like the totality of how cool this is going to be, but knowing something good is coming. So I don't know if you can speak to that, of what does that feel like,
Yeah, no, I definitely feel like, we probably had like a master's level course in waiting, and that has been helpful. And I think what Tiffany said will really stick with me about, like, I don't know when this will end, but I know that when I get beyond it, I'll be able to look back and see what God was doing all along. And I wonder if the same wasn't true for, like Mary and Joseph, right? Through this like whole process when they're like, oh, wow, we got, the shepherds were able to find us because we were in the, in the
stable?
The stable. Yeah. Well, I was like, what do you call that thing? I'm a pastor. You're supposed to know that.
It was like the thing, the
yeah.
stable.
There's no room in the inn. Okay. So,
you got this.
But,
Jeopardy.
You know, like I
is-
wonder if Mary and Joseph are able to look back and see that thing, and then I wonder if this moment of waiting for us will be able to say, like, we don't know when this will end, but when we look back, we'll see these things like the angel speaking to Joseph and Mary, and there not being any room at the inn, and like all of these different things, and to say, like, you know, for Tiffany to be able to say, look, I've been through this process, and this is what it looks like when you get through it.
Mm-hmm.
And in the meantime, we're there. Right. I mean, that's all like what Tiffany does, right? Orphan Outreach is being able to sit with families who are going through that process of waiting and go, look, like people have waited and this is what's happened at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Others have waited before you.
Right.
And
yeah.
have made it through.
Yes.
So,
yes.
And then you like create like a community of people who are waiting. Right. I mean, like Tiffany has like this community of people who are just like sitting around and waiting, and they like are preparing and they are working and they're doing what only they can do. And like, that's church, right? I mean, that's what we're doing is we're sitting around Sunday and we're waiting. And we're saying, okay, we're not going to just sit here and hope that all these things like fall in place. I'm going to do the things that only I can do.
Right.
And we're going to trust in God to do what only God does.
Yeah. It's so interesting because, you know, no one would really wish coronavirus and what's gone on, like on any of us or anything like that. But I do wonder, like you're saying, like we get past this, what are the lessons that we're learning in the wait, you know? Are there any lessons that you're, is it pretty similar to just the high stakes waiting that you've experienced, or what are the lessons that y'all are learning in this like global time of waiting kind of? Talk to your experience of that.
I talked a little bit about really knowing and understanding how amazing our staff is internationally now, that they didn't need us to come over on mission trips to support the work they were doing on the ground.
Yeah.
So that's something for sure. Like, I think we felt like when we would go on trips, and maybe it was just me, that going on the trips and bringing people to the ministry sites was like the integral part of the ministry that was going on in each of these countries. And we sit back and we're like, if we never could go again, like the work we've done and the seeds we planted in those countries is just taking off.
Yeah.
And they're taking ownership, and in a way, in a beautiful way, of their own countries, and they're being able to make a difference in their own countries that we could have never done in ways we couldn't conceive. So for sure, that's one way that I have seen this year just through our staff. And we've in our small group, we've talked about prayer, and I'd mentioned that I'd been going down the list and adding different people of our international staff to my prayer list in a very private way. I haven't told them, hey, I'm praying for you. Yeah. Because I'm just in awe of what they've done and the work that they're doing. And I know that they need our prayers. Our whole Russia staff got COVID.
Wow.
And they were really sick.
Yeah.
But they never stopped doing their ministry.
Wow.
For example. So
that's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, I've been thinking a lot. So there's been a lot of blessings that have come out of COVID for us. One of the blessings is that adopting Elena. So my daughter Anna, my younger daughter Anna is now 7. Elijah is 4. We live in a 3-bedroom house, so Anna and Elijah are sharing a bedroom now, which is what they weren't doing beforehand. So now they have bunk beds, which was cool for a little bit, and is not as cool now. Although they get to jump off the bunk bed, so I guess that's still kind of cool.
That's always still cool.
But anyways, there were a lot of changes that happened in our house, and I had if nothing but a stable house growing up. I moved in the house when I was 3, and graduated from high school from that same house. Yeah. My parents at 6:30 were on the couch watching 2020. At 9:30 they went to bed. It was just this routine house, which was very helpful for me growing up. It creates an identity. And so I was so anxious for my kids to have this, what looked like instability. But the thing that COVID did was we were home. And so now we've added this person to our house, but mom and dad are also home all the time. And dad is having dinner with us every night. And every night we're going around talking about our favorite part of our day and what was hard about today. And we're praying together and things that we did that before COVID, but not on a habitual basis. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And so that's been an incredible blessing that's come out of this experience. And there was another question that you asked that I don't think I answered it, but
that was good.
yeah.
So just kind of like from just you both have a ton of experience sitting in high stakes waiting. Is there any really kind of practical, tangible things that people can do if they find themselves in a high stakes situation of waiting? Maybe it's, I don't know, I could think of a dozen situations where maybe it's not just adoption, but
totally.
Sitting in a hospital for someone.
Sitting in a hospital waiting.
That's a high stakes thing that a lot of people experience that we aren't necessarily equipped to experience, but you guys have been equipped. Yeah.
One of the practices I've had for a little while now is like journaling. So I do a thing called like bullet journaling. It's like a fad thing, but it's really helpful for me. But one of the things it talks about is like the power of making lists. And so I found for me when anxiety would be high about the adoption process, to make a list of the things that I could do, and then work to check those things off, and make a list of things that I couldn't do and I can't control, and to throw that away because it's not going to do you any good. And so that list and focusing on the things that I could control, and I think it's at any point, right? So if you're in COVID and you can't control a lot of things, how fast the vaccine is going to work. You can't even control, your other family members or where they're going to go, but you can control you, right? You can control where you're going to be, decisions you're going to make, and those are the things that you should focus on.
Make lists.
I
like that.
Of the things that you can control, right?
Yeah.
And then do that and check it off.
Make a bucket list.
Or make a bucket list.
That's what I'm into.
That's what I heard. Yeah.
Make a bucket list.
list.
Is that what you heard?
Yeah. Try all the fast food restaurants.
Throwing away a list of things you can't control. I'd like that a lot. I've never actually written them down before, but that seems like a really good practice, right?
No, you gotta write it down and like
literally, I cannot.
Handwriting a thing. There's this whole process of like handwriting is slower than typing.
Yeah.
And there's this like physical process of like getting it out of your brain because it's going to stay there whether you write it down or not. Right? Well, it's going to stay there if you don't write it down. And then writing it down gets it on a piece of paper and away from you. And
did you burn it or you just threw it away?
Just throw it away.
Okay. Please, if you do this, if you do this, please let us know if you burn it because I really want to know because that's really cool.
Yeah.
I think you should
have like a little ceremony.
Yeah, have a little
like sounds kind of cool, right?
A death ceremony for the things you cannot control.
There you go.
That'd be a good service.
That'd be really interesting.
Right?
I'm just picturing you doing it now. Sitting at your kitchen sink with a list on fire.
I was going to do it at a fire pit in my parents' backyard, but there you go.
That sounds better than a kitchen sink, for sure.
No,
if we're going to go big.
I don't know why. Just maybe that's I can control if this list is going to catch my apartment on fire.
Well, it's also, I can't control what's on the list, but I can control that the list is burned up and doesn't own me anymore.
Right.
Yeah. That's the key, I think.
Yeah.
What do you think? Any other tangible tips? Any other advice?
Well, I'm a writer on paper, so I had written notes because I feel the same way. I like to get it out. So I was going back over and I noticed I wrote a couple of times gratitude, which is kind of interesting when you're talking about things that are high stakes waiting and hard things that are going on, like waiting for adoption and waiting during COVID. And I think for me, turning to gratitude and looking at the moments. So just like you were talking about, just the moments with your family.
Yeah.
Both my kids, now one was graduating with her graduate degree and the other was graduating from college, and they both had to come home. So when would you ever be able to spend the last semester with your two children, adult children, all together?
Yeah.
So I have gratitude in that.
Yeah.
So looking at the things in the process that you can have gratitude and
absolutely,
and writing those down and holding on to those.
Yeah.
Even in the midst of the things I'm not happy about at all, like not being able to go on the mission trip. The things that stress me out. Are we going to get sick? I have events. They're going to be all virtual now. The word pivot is not a friendly word to me anymore. I don't like the word pivot.
I think I said pivot twice in the first episode we recorded.
Yeah. Pivot.
It's
like that. What's that Friends episode? The Friends episode.
Pivot.
Yes.
Yeah. That's how everyone's feeling now.
Innovation and pivot.
Do you want to? So you do have an event coming up that, do you want to plug it?
Well, always, of
Yeah.
course.
So plug your event that you're doing.
Okay, that's
Give
a
us the
great
plug.
idea.
Tell us that, and then also just say in general how anyone who's listening can support Orphan Outreach. That'd be great.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks for asking. We had an annual luncheon we would do in December that with it we'd have a Guatemalan market. So we would go to Guatemala and we would buy all these beautiful things the artisans down there make. We would bring them back and we would sell them at the market to benefit the orphans and children in Guatemala. So we had to pivot this
Keyword.
year, keyword pivot, and turn it to an online market. And again, that's a place where I've really seen God. He just knew that we were going to have to do this. Last September, I went to Guatemala and I went with a couple of the girls that we go shopping for these products. And we decided to do a trip up into the mountains and actually meet with some artisans directly and explore what it would look like if we can employ more directly artisans while they were doing their work. So we built these relationships. When I went in March, again, looking back now at God's timing, on that last trip to Guatemala, we picked up tons of fabric that we thought was going to be made into beautiful pillows. But they all turned into masks that made of Guatemalan fabric, like what I have on.
That's cool.
And we pivoted and turned our marketplace to online. Starting by Memorial Day, just in case maybe we were going to have to be online in December.
Right.
Just in case, because I wanted to cover my bases.
Just a plan B.
Let's plan B, go ahead and put the market online. So we learned all things Square Marketplace and how to do all of that. This is actually hand beaded, this chain in a little village in Guatemala, a ministry that's out of one of the churches we work in.
Wow.
The women were hand beading.
Yeah.
Like,
That's
kind
really
of
cool.
Very unusual things. Like they had hand beaded a bunch of frogs with Santa hats. Now,
Sure.
frogs with Santa hats, I mean, I went to TCU, so I bought every frog with a Santa hat that they had
This is mine. I want this.
for my friends and everyone else. But in general, people really.
It's a niche market.
It is.
Yeah,
it's a very niche.
call
It's
that.
very,
Yeah.
very niche market. So we had met with these ladies and said, what if you made these other things that people might like
Yeah.
bracelets and purses and then this was another idea we came up with, and they were totally capable. If they could make a
awesome.
frog with a Santa hat,
You can make anything.
you pretty much
Yeah.
can make anything, right?
For, pe-
So-
for people who are listening, she's pointing out that she has a beaded chain that connects to her mask that acts as a necklace. So if you're
kind of like a necklace for readers.
yeah, so if you're not watching,
What are those? Like croquis for your
No.
mask.
like
You know,
that.
like a,
It's
you
like
know,
a croquis
come
for
on,
your
cro-
mask.
you know
What's
what
a
croquis
croquis?
are.
on the back. Things on the
Croquis
back
are
of your
things
glasses
that keep your glasses on your face.
Oh,
like
frat
when you're on the
boys.
boat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
when you're on the boat.
Yeah. So
Okay, so
never
you have
had
an event
croquis.
coming up.
So
Your event,
the
yes.
Yeah, the
exciting
event,
thing
yeah.
is we have an event. We pivoted all online on December 10th
December 10th.
Oh,
Okay.
wow.
from 5 to 6. We have a online program
Mm-hmm.
and you can go to our website to get more information about it. I'm sure we could probably share information.
Yeah. What's the website?
What's your website?
Orphanoutreach.org.
Oh, okay.
So just the
And you
word
have a
orphan and the
Facebook
word
page, right?
outreach. We have a Facebook page, we have Instagram, and at the end of the program, we will kick off the Guatemalan market online. So everybody can go and buy all of these goods that we've been able to employ people in Guatemala this whole time during the pandemic. These people have been able to work in their homes and talk about dignified work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They haven't, in a time when there were no tourists there
Yeah.
to buy their goods, we've been employing them. And in fact, to the point that, like, every time the person who's over the market would ask me, well, what about, I found this other kind of bag, should we buy it? And I'm like, just buy it all. Like, buy as much as you can, because if
Right.
we can spread out the
Right.
wealth. So all of this amazing, amazing product will be online on December 10th. So you can join our program from 5 to 6 and learn about what we're doing specifically to help the orphans in Guatemala is that program. And then at 6 o'clock, the online market will be unveiled for everyone to
Awesome.
shop.
And how long will it be open online?
It's now going to be on forever.
Oh, so you,
Oh, that's so cool.
But
Okay.
if you want your gifts in time for
There you
Christmas,
go.
order
Yeah.
by December 15th.
The
Okay.
big
So
question
between the
is,
10th and 15th.
will we have beaded frogs with Santa hats online?
Sadly, no, I bought them all. I told you.
They're all gone. All of them.
I have them all. So, or I've given them to my other TC
Fair,
friends.
fair.
I don't have a whole collection at home. I just have one.
All the same frogs on a shelf.
But the stuff that's on there is going to be a lot better
Okay.
than frogs with Santa
I
hats.
mean,
So
I have my heart set, but I guess I'll look at something else.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Yeah.
Thank you for just sharing your experiences. I know that I learned a lot about waiting.
Yeah.
I'm not patience is a tough one for me, man.
Yeah.
But thank you just both for sharing your experiences with us
Yeah.
today.
Thank you guys.
yeah, thanks.
This is always fun.
Yeah, it's always fun.
Yeah.
All right, folks, we'll see you next time.
If you enjoyed the show, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe on wherever you listen to your podcasts. That really helps us get the word out about Out on a Limb and helps other people find our podcast. From all of us here at Lovers Lane,
Thanks for going out on a limb with us.